So thanks everyone for joining us for this Q&A for Under My Skin. So tonight we're joined by the cast and director of the film. So how about you guys just introduce yourselves briefly before we get to the questions? David?
Hello, I'm the writer-director. I'm David O'Donnell.
After you, Alex.
My name's Alex Russell, and I play Ryan.
My name's Chloe Freeman, and I play Denny too, if we're giving Denny numbers.
Okay, cool. And I'm Baptiste. I work at Raindance. I'm one of the programmers here, and I also work for the film school. So first of all, thank you so much for sharing this film, which is just a very wonderful and very interesting film. So David, to begin with you, since you wrote the film, what was the origin of the film for you? What was the initial spark?
Well, so Raindance, who's a producer on the film, couldn't be with us today. So I guess the original kernel was them coming out about 8 years ago now. So that was, I guess, the first sort of inspiration. This story is not based on a true story, but the story developed from there. We developed the story, and it became what it is. It sort of evolved over time. The story had this journey itself, and here it is.
And how long did it take you to develop it?
It's a tricky question because, I wrote the first draft and then went away on other projects. Yeah. So I guess the first draft was probably 6 years ago, but then there were times when I was working on something else.
Yeah.
We're sort of coming back and forth to the project, and then, probably about a year before production, we said, okay, we're going to make this film. We don't care how we make it. We don't care if we have to make it on 5 cents. We're just going to make it. We're going to make it happen. That's it.
Yeah. So you were just so passionate about that story and bringing it to the screen that you just decided, now's the time, let's do it.
Pretty much. And it was a big challenge. It was a very tight schedule. We shot the entire film on 15 days.
Okay.
We had a very tight budget. We're undermanned. So everybody from the actors to all of us really had to pull together. But sometimes funny things happen on films without, that don't have a big budget, where something that the passion of the team coming together sort of infuses the film with something special. There's so much heart behind it that, I think that's what happened on this film.
Yeah, well, I think it's true of a lot of independent films where they're, the writers and directors at the beginning are just so passionate about making that story happen that it's just, we're going to make it happen. And I think that really shows in the film that everyone was really dedicated to that story.
And you've got to have a team. You've got to have a team that is willing to have that same approach, Yeah. And everybody was so game. The actors were game. The crew was great. So it was a good team.
Can I add something to that? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, go on.
Just an example of that popped into my head. Like sort of these little happy accidents that happen when you have zero money and zero time. There were just many instances where you have a plan, right? And this is your plan. And then like, you don't have any money and you don't have any time. And then we can't get all those shots. We can't whatever. And I remember one day, Jack, who's our amazing DP, I'm sure you saw how beautiful the movie looked.
Yeah.
Jack and Dave were just kind of figuring out how they were going to shoot this scene. It was Lex and I in this scene. And they basically figured out like, well, could we just play it in the wide? And there's not going to be coverage. Like, can we tell that story and get those moments? And that's what it ends up being. And I could not honestly imagine the scene any other way, because I'm back getting pizza or something, and Lex is on the couch playing guitar, and Lex looks over their shoulder and then looks back. And then right as Lex looks away, I look over, and then vice versa and vice versa. And it's just these people missing each other. And I think that, I don't know if that would have played as strong if you had it in coverage. So I kind of salute Dave and I salute Jack and our whole, we had such an amazing crew, and you just get these little magical moments, you know? So.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's the magic of sort of, yeah, just doing your best under pressure, and then some beautiful things happen.
Right.
Yeah.
And so for the actors, at what point did you get involved in the film? Had you collaborated with David before, Chloe?
I had never met David, never met Alex or anyone on the team. Just auditioned and got super lucky, I guess.
We got super lucky.
And Alex, was it the same for you?
For me, so Dave and I have collaborated for a number of years on different projects. It's our first feature. We've never done a feature before. And so that was biblical. That was Titanic. Yeah, we've just done, you know, a number of short films together and so forth. And it's always the same old story. It's you kind of take off your shoestrings and then you offer that to the budget and then add a couple of dollars, and that's about it. But we've been very blessed to just meet a lot of super talented people, and who are willing to come. You know, if they're excited about a project, then they're sort of, you know, such true artists and hard workers and generous people that they're willing to donate time and do things, you know, for far less than their rates and so forth, so that you can somehow create something compelling and beautiful. And that's kind of been our MO for a long time. Maybe one day we'll have a budget, but yeah, it's been a number of years kind of working together under those circumstances.
And so, I want to dig into the main concept, sort of in terms of the execution of the story, which is having those different actors play one of the characters, and the central character, like the heart of the story, really. And so at what point did that concept come about for you, David?
That was not that far out from actual production. Relatively, it was probably about 4 or 5 months out, maybe 5 months out. So there was a big sort of, because it wasn't that way in the original script. And I've got to give credit where it's due. The original idea for that approach was Raindance. So my producer. And when they suggested that, I just thought, absolutely, that's it. That's so right. But yeah, there's lots of layers of the logic and what we talked about, and why that would be a good idea. You know, so I guess from Rainan's point of view, they felt that, you know, the experience of being non-binary is not one thing. And this approach is going to bring multiple perspectives to the character. And that's exactly what happened. So Chloe and Liv, everyone brought a different approach to the character. They all integrate, but there are these different textures. And I think it's a lovely way to sort of broaden, you know, what this journey was. And then it just seemed right. If the film is centering on a gender non-conforming character, why would we, you know, why not use a non-conforming narrative structure? Why not use a different convention? I mean, generally, I think where it's justified, different approaches, different ways of thinking about things are very important, especially in this day and age. So it all felt right for this story.
And so how, just in terms of, I mean, it's true, it does elevate sort of the movie into sort of having all those layers and different dimensions, and so it really sort of, it's the whole conceit of the film sort of magnified with that concept. And so Chloe, for you, what was it like to play sort of just a part of that character's journey as an actor? How was that?
Yeah, well, firstly, I should say that, you know, having 4 different non-binary actors play this role, well, it's genius, but it's also, it resonates with me so much because, I mean, this is parallel to life, right? I mean, every non-binary person is different. They all have different, an expression of gender in a different way. And I think it's really important to show that. As David said, if it's just one person, one, you know, instance of someone's journey, it's really difficult to kind of think about that as a non-binary person and how that might reflect you, right? And so I think using all those different actors, you know, we all look completely different, we all act completely different, I think is really, really powerful. And then for me, yeah, you know, I was talking to Lex about this a little bit. It's really interesting to think about prepping and understanding a whole character arc, which we all certainly have to do, and then really focus in on, but what part of the story am I telling, and how do I move this story along in the right way to, you know, to really serve it. So yeah, it was really great. Super privileged to do it.
And Alex, for you, sort of, you obviously were here throughout the whole arc of the film, but acting with different scene partners every time. So what was that like for you?
It's funny because I've been asked this question twice today, and I love saying it was just so fun. Like, it was so. First of all, it's so interesting. You know, you're telling the same story, but you're working with different people with different rhythms, and just as an actor in a scene, how someone can come at a moment or a conflict and tackle a scene with just a different rhythm and bringing a different lens to this arc. So it was really fun. You know, we had you know, I watched this film and I'm blown away by each and every performance and sort of expression of Danny. Chloe, you just did such an incredible job. Like, I take my hat off to you. I think the scene in the bedroom is, every time I watch it, I'm like, I'm brought to a still place, and I find it really, really moving. And but across the board, like, everyone just brought something so interesting and unique, because everyone is bringing their own lived-in experience, their own lens. And so it's so exciting to see that in the film, and it was so exciting to be a part of and to get to experience on the day. And it also creates, for me, like, just selfishly as an artist, like, it just created this, like, you know, what we love as artists is what's unpredictable and unexpected. And when you're working with 4 different artists, you don't know what's coming, you know? And so I think that it removed any sense of, like, predictability or, I don't know, it was very exciting to kind of be in and to be, you know, a supporting part of, and very, you know, very fun, but also just so, like, lovely to see when I get to watch the finished product, because it just, and also, like, this was a risk, you know, this was like, I just take my hat off to Raindance for coming up with this. I agree with Chloe. I think it's genius. And I take my hat off to Dave and Raindance just for, you know, they spent time kind of discussing this and figuring out how this could work. And you just, something like that, which is unconventional and sort of, you know, almost surrealist in nature, you hope it works, but you just never really know, right? You don't know exactly how it's going to translate in the end. And that's a lot of what filmmaking is. And so I just find it, when I watch the movie, like I was saying earlier to someone else I was talking to, the moment obviously the first sort of time we see it is we see all the Denny's in the mirror at the start, but Chloe, when Liv goes down to put the contact lens in their eye in the optometrist, and they come back up and it's you, I don't know, that transition like always like floors me. So it's just so nice to see it translate so well and support the story in such a complex and, as Dave said, sort of, you know, multi-textured way. It's nice to come out the other end and be like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So for you, it was just first making the film, it was just more fun to have more people to play with.
Yeah.
And then at the end, it's just fun because it just translates so well in the end.
Yeah. And in terms of the experience, like just so fun and such an enriched experience because you're working with these different artists, but also just like such a more educational experience for me as well, you know, being like a cis guy and like coming in and having conversations and you know, exploring this subject matter, you know, with one person would have been, you know, incredibly, you know, it would have been invaluable for me, right? But to have 4 people there who I'm working with and learning from is, you know, it makes it that much greater and that much more varied in terms of experience and stuff that I could kind of, you know, listen to and kind of communicate on. So it was great in that way, you know.
Yeah.
No, I'd love to say, because I think I'm the only person here that can say it, that that, you know, this is a really delicate story to tell, right? I mean, and you know, I think that David and Alex, you know, really brave to jump in and tell it, and also, you know, as an actor and a non-binary person on set, I just felt so incredibly safe, and you know, each moment was respected. You know, the intimate moments on the set just felt, you know, super safe. They were handled really carefully. My gender identity was respected. My choices were respected. And so, you know, I want to take my hat off to both of you and to Rain for creating that space, because I think it's so difficult to tell such a nuanced, delicate story if, you know, the actors and everyone that has experienced this stuff doesn't feel like they can truly go to those places, you know?
Yeah.
Chloe,
yeah, no, so,
Thank you, Chloe.
Yeah, thank you. I'm touched.
That's lovely to say, yeah.
David, so there's an audience question, which I think will be for you. It's just, why not have multiple non-binary characters to show the multiplicity of non-binary experiences, as opposed to having several actors playing one character?
Can you repeat that question?
So you made the choice of having several actors play that one character, but if sort of showing that multiplicity of experiences was sort of a goal of yours, why not have several characters with all those actors playing together?
It just, ultimately, this was a two-hander story, you know. It was, yeah, I guess a different story. It certainly could have more non-binary characters. But just for this particular, and there would be those stories to tell. In this case, you know, it was a two-hander, and we went in this direction. But
yeah, no, and as I said before, I think it really elevates sort of what's already a really strong, beautiful story into something that's so much more powerful, and it's really wonderful to see. But on that note, sort of, because obviously gender non-conforming people are sort of don't necessarily have that much visibility in film and TV, and it's kind of starting very slowly, just in terms of culturally having that awareness. But what are your hopes for the stories that we tell, or that those people tell about themselves, just sort of going forward?
I think things perhaps, as you say, are maybe slowly shifting, but I, I just think people are sick of the same old stories, same old narratives, same old. You can feel the culture wearing thin, and it's becoming less and less relevant to real life.
Yeah.
So I just think more diversity generally, that is a greater reflection on real life. And just beyond that, just taking different approaches, thinking about things, just not being lazy, trying to explore something different, trying to explore a different approach. But specifically for non-binary folks, of course, should have more visibility, more support, more more stories being told. This is just one story. So, hopefully many more to come.
Yeah, well, it's certainly a stepping stone in the right direction, this film. So it's really positive to see. Chloe, what kind of stories do you aspire to tell or see other people tell, sort of in that realm?
Yeah. I think not that I just want to revert back to this film, but I think what is important and what this film really is to me is this idea of this idea of identity, right? It feels so intimidating when you say it like that. But I think this film does a really good job at exploring that, gender aside for a second, just yourself as a human, how you express yourself, yes, your gender and your sexuality, and with label or without label. There's lots of different variants of it, but I think what I enjoy exploring as an actor, and I think what this film does is discover, have a discovery around your identity and what does that mean and how does that change? And it changes constantly, I think, with all of us. And so I love that I got to do that here, and I would love to keep doing that. Like, what does that look like as, even for myself as a human, as I get older, I change, things aren't things aren't the same as they were. Even when I did this film, a year ago, I'm feeling different and expressing myself in a slightly different way. And so I want to keep telling those stories, because I think if people know that it's okay to, if you feel safe enough to change and to explore yourself and ask yourself the hard questions, then ultimately you're going to be happier. And I think that this film shows that.
Yeah, well, it's wonderful to hear from you sort of what the experience has been for you to be able to participate in telling that story, because generally we talk about sort of the impact that representation has on the audiences and the viewers, but it's true that it's rarely spoken about the fact that, yeah, for the people who participate in telling those stories,
yeah.
it changes you as well, I imagine.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. I made a joke as I came on here, and I said to the guys, I've kept my haircut that you gave me, because I didn't have short hair when I started on this film. And then we shaved it in the scene, and even just that, right? It's just hair at the end of the day, but it made me feel completely different. It took me like a few months to kind of get on board with it, and then I was like, you know what, this is me actually, and this is how I want to express myself. And just little things like that, absolutely, it changes you, and oh yeah, friend. And something else in this film too is that the separation of gender and sexuality is really interesting too, right? I mean, that I think that made me think a lot, because I'm comfortable in my body. I think I understand my gender, but we never really separate those things out, I don't think, in society a lot. And to do that, I think, is really smart. That there's so much love between Denny and Alex's character, and that's kind of separate to the fact that Denny is struggling with their gender.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting too.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's another question to the actors. What made you accept your role in this movie? Alex?
For me, well, I was involved in the project fairly early on. So I saw this character go through various stages of development, and I mean, not so much accepting to play a role, as I was like super interested in this story and what inspired this story with Dave and Rainan, and I found it very interesting, and I found it to be something that seemed important to explore, and so I was just excited at the idea of just being a part of it. And then as I actually, and scripts go through various stages of development, and I was already sort of on board and interest and intrigued. But then as things progress and the closer you get, I watched Ryan just become more and more nuanced. And I started to get really excited about playing him because, Ryan has at the start of this film a very narrow view, if I may say so, in terms of the concept of non-binary and just queer culture in general. He's very sort of straight-laced, and that can be written a certain way. That could be written far more black and white and less nuanced. And the closer we got to sort of pre-production, Dave, I felt really just had such a complex, rich character on the page that I felt so many people who are not bad human beings, but might have limited experiences, limited view on this subject matter, I could identify with. And I started to see how this character, this film, first and foremost, I think one of the exciting things about this movie is I think that outside of people who, who would be very supportive and loving of and accepting of different experiences of what gender is, and open and wanting to be connective, people who have a more closed off thing, or they just have no experience, or they think that it just doesn't interest them, or whatever it is. I think that this movie strikes some kind of chord that feels to me very universal. Like Denny is going through this huge moment in life and questioning gender. And then at the same time, Ryan, before he even meets Denny, or before he even sees and falls in love with Denny, is going through this huge disconnect himself between what the world expects of him, what his job expects of him, how the people around him are acting, which is in some instances, like the guy talking in the bar at the start, our friend James Savanides, who's like, very overtly, clearly a misogynist and, the most backwards thinking guy ever. And then a more subtle, hidden, sort of intrinsic, element that is not healthy, and that is not good. That is, there are things, there are aspects of people's personalities that can be hidden, that have, these microaggressions that support, I can't remember the word, it's like heteronorm. Anyway, long and short of it is, things can be hidden beneath the surface. And I think that Ryan is dealing with a sliding scale of that in his workplace and in his life, and something is nagging at him from inside. And so it's fascinating to me to see these two people go along, and to see what Denny goes through, and then to have Ryan there as a parallel, and seeing them trying to navigate it together. So I started to get super excited about this character, because I thought this could be a way in for someone who hasn't yet found a way in to this conversation, and who it might be really important for them to have that, and to become a part of that conversation.
And so Chloe, so in terms of saying yes to the role, you said you auditioned for it. Were you happier to sort of that they said yes to you, or that you could say yes to them afterwards? once they offered it?
It's a good question. Was I happier that they suggested me? I think I was so excited, honestly, to play a non-binary role. I cannot stress that enough. I mostly, all my auditions are predominantly female characters. And so it's a real treat to be able to, you know, to be able to play a character that's non-binary just to begin with, right? And so that's what that's what we need to kind of change moving forward. But on top of that, you know, the script is super juicy, as Alex just said. Like there's so much to take away from it, and so yeah, I was you know, very, very happy that they accepted me.
So quickly before we wrap up, there's someone from the audience saying, as a non-binary person, I felt so seen in film for the first time. Thank you. Why did Dan not meet any other non-binary people for instance, in the therapy center? There was a lot of focus on the cis-het Ryan, but not much discussion on how he should have therapy, if anything, and use his privilege to call people out and not just leave his job. Still a stunning film, though, and thank you very much. So I think this one's for David.
Question. Yeah, there's lots of, well, I guess lots of elements, and I think each of these characters are lacking community. But yeah, you know, I think yes, Danny is lacking support, and when they go into the doctor's office, so it wasn't a therapy, or maybe they're referring to that point in the middle of the film when they walk in. Yeah, it's a fair question that you know, perhaps in a bigger film or in a different film that you know, Danny's community or Danny finding community would be an important part of this journey. So yeah, you know, I certainly would hope that, you know, in the world of this film, that Danny has, by the end of the film, that Danny starts to connect with more community. In this particular story, we're pretty much just focusing on these two characters, really. But it's a fair point.
Maybe you can do that for in a sequel, potentially.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. So I think someone sent a message, which I think will be the perfect way to round off. From Cordelia, thank you so much, Chloe. As Alex said, the scene in the bedroom was absolutely stunning, and the transition with contacts made me cry so much. It perfectly portrayed that feeling of wearing someone's gender affirming. Thank you, David, and everyone, for making such a true non-binary story.
Thank you so
That's
much.
lovely.
So sweet.
Wow.
It's lovely.
Okay, thank you so much, all three of you, for joining us, and thank you for sharing your wonderful film with us. We're really, really proud to be showing it, and yeah, and best of luck for all your next projects.
Thank you, Baptiste.
Thank you so much. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you guys for
Yeah,
joining.
everyone.